Time for our rants and raves of the week, and we'll start with Adam.
I've got a rant for our friends at Global Post who do a lot of good work, but did a story today that I thought was a little bizarre. Back in July, a reporter at Global Post had done a piece on a town in Israel, Ashkelon, that had become sort of a ghost town because of the war with Hamas. They followed up that same reporter with the story that came out today, Friday, talking about how thanks to Global Post's intervention, a guy came from the U.S. to Israel and bought a round of free beers for everyone who happened to be in this pub in Ashkelon. And the headline, as we can see here, is, how did Global Post get a pub full of Israelis free beers? Well, it all began with this story about the conflict with Hamas. I'm always a little skeptical of media organization X gets results stories. This seemed to me wildly inappropriate in the context of a war that has exacted a pretty horrible toll on both sides.
Who's next? Callie.
I have a rant for the Washington Post. They found themselves having to retract 2,000 words from a story by reporter Jeff Guo. This is a new project that they're doing called the Storyline Project, and it was about black men and HIV and how, what's going on and what are the sources of infection and spread and blah, blah, blah. They had a huge quote from this guy, and after it ran, his lover wrote to the Post and said, never happened, don't know what you're talking about. And so they had to remove it. The Washington Post ought to be particularly sensitive about this. Yeah. This is the paper of Janet Cook. People don't remember that, but it was the case upon which many journalism lessons have been written, where she made up a whole story about someone that didn't exist. But here, I'd like to know, and whenever these cases come up, because we're seeing it again, how did it happen? How did they find that it happened? Found out that it happened, and I think it was more than this guy calling in. And then what did they do beyond retracting? I think that's important for us to know.
Are they going to explain it? Have they said?
No, that's my point. I'd like to have some explaining.
All right, Susie.
So I have a rave for John Oliver and his show This Week Tonight, which is on HBO now. Initially, people sort of said, oh, what's he going to do that's that different than Jon Stewart? He had filled in for Jon Stewart over the summer, but he's been just great. He does these amazing sort of rants. And this
he did
week,
the net neutrality thing. That was fantastic.
The net neutrality one was a great one, and he did one this past week on the blurring line between news and advertising, which we talk about a lot here. And this is my favorite clip. We'll show it to you.
It's not trickery, it's sharing storytelling tools. And that's not bullshit, it's repurposed bovine waste. And look, in news, that is seemingly the model now. Ads are baked into content like chocolate chips into a cookie, except it's actually more like raisins into a cookie because no one wants them there.
So I just love this. I thought this was a great rant. You should watch the whole thing, and that's it. I love it.
All right, John.
I like a raisin cookie, but I guess I'm in the minority. I've got a rant for the long-running, reprehensible media fascination with the political opinions of celebrities who have no clue what they're talking about. In this case, we're talking about Penelope Cruz, Javier Bardem. Did I pronounce that correctly? They jointly came out with a statement slamming Israel over the conflict in Gaza, an issue about which, as best I can tell, they know nothing. They were immediately trashed by Jon Voight, who's a Hollywood right-winger who appears to be equally ignorant about his subject matter. And to top it all off, Glenn Beck got involved, slamming Voight for slamming them. I don't care what any of them think about a subject unless, like Angelina Jolie with her work with the UN and so forth, there really is a body of knowledge to be shared. Otherwise, just shut up.
Shut up and sing, as Laura Ingraham would say.
There you go.
All right, I have a rave for, not that they need any more ego stroking, but Carl Bernstein, Bob Woodward. It was 40 years ago today that Richard Nixon got in his helicopter. He had resigned the night before, and of course, Bernstein and Woodward were the two reporters, intrepid reporters at the time, really at the cutting edge of investigative journalism at the time. 40 years ago, started in 1972. 2 years later, the president resigned. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. Nothing has really happened quite like that since.
There were a couple of ham and eggers on the police beat, but they wouldn't let go of the story.
They would not let go.
They
and
redefined
Ben Bradley
it.
wouldn't let them let go of it.
Yeah.
All right.